Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So yesterday, Speaker Mike Johnson and several Republican members of Congress and others who are concerned about voter integrity and election integrity held a press conference on the House steps to reveal what they are calling the SAVE Act, or the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. Joining me now is Cleta Mitchell, who is a senior partner for the Conservative Partnership Institute and chairs the Election Integrity Project there. And Cleta, you were there yesterday at the press conference. Tell us why the SAVE Act is so important heading into 2024.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jenna. It's really appreciate it. Look, I mean, all of us have assumed that the federal law makes it a crime for a non-citizen to vote in a federal election. However, I will just say that is a very porous statute, and there are too many exceptions. You can never prosecute anybody under that law, which is what the Democrats intended. But the point is that what we've learned is that all of the presumptions when federal laws were passed in 1995 and then in 1993, and then again after the Florida presidential election, the Help America Vote Act, all these federal laws presumed that the immigration laws would be being enforced. But what we've learned is that when the NVRA, National Voter Registration Act, was passed in 1993, it requires the states to register everyone at the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, and social services agencies. It says if you go in there for a driver's license, you go into the social service agency for food stamps or welfare benefits, they've got to register you to vote, or they've got to offer you the opportunity to register to vote. And so nobody really thought about the fact that you should also require that they prove that they're citizens, because non-citizens get driver's licenses, non-citizens get welfare benefits. And so now what we realize that the only requirements under federal law are that the voter registration agencies have to establish that they have to confirm identity and residency, but they don't have to confirm citizenship. And the federal statute has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to prevent a state from being able to require proof of documentary proof of citizenship when they use the federal voter application form, and every state's required to use it. So now what we see is we have a perfect storm with the Biden executive order ordering every federal agency to register people to vote that come into contact with their agency. And we've now learned that includes people in prison, in federal prison, that includes people who have come across the border illegally, and the immigration laws are not being enforced. So now we have a perfect storm of millions of illegals in the country, non-citizens, 21 million non-citizens, and then all these additional 8 million illegals. There's no documentary proof of citizenship that's even allowed under federal law. This bill would change that. It would overturn that Supreme Court decision from 11 years ago and say, not only can states require proof of citizenship in order to register to vote, they must obtain documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. That's what we're trying to restore, is the principle that only citizens vote in American elections.
And Cleta, that seems so straightforward, and it should be a nonpartisan issue that clearly only American citizens should vote in American elections. And it's really disappointing, frankly, that the prior Congress years ago didn't think to even include this in the statute. But where are we at with bipartisan support of the SAVE Act? Because Joe Biden clearly is having the porous open borders. He's flying in a lot of illegals, admittedly, and is even looking at bringing in Gazan refugees. And so clearly he wants to bring in a lot of illegals, I think, for the purpose of allowing them or even encouraging them to vote. So even if this gets through Congress, would Joe Biden sign it?
Well, that's always whoever knows. I mean, the problem is that I really worry that the Democrats in office, the powerful, the elite Democrats, the White House, et cetera, that they're not in, they're out of step with rank and file Democrats in the country. There is data, polling data from earlier this year that shows that 83% of the American people, including a vast majority of Democrats, support the principle that only citizens should vote in American elections, and 87% of Americans believe that you should have to show documentary proof that you are a citizen to get registered. So, and that's across the board, independents, Republicans, Democrats. So if we can build enough public support and awareness of this issue and this problem, then I hope that those people in Congress, even the Democrats, will realize this is something the American people want. They want to make sure that foreigners are not determining the outcome of our elections. So, and then you've got Joe Biden facing the electorate in the fall. So, does he veto the bill in order to try to win favor and do what the American people want? Or does he yield to his left-wing masters and basically show that what they really are trying to do is manipulate the outcome of the election by allowing illegals to vote in our elections?
Wow. And so you have a website that provides some of these resources, and I was reviewing it earlier, and it says, according to the US Census Bureau, there's over a potential of voters that could vote illegally of upwards of 21 million. I mean, when we're talking about some of these razor thin margins, I mean, that's a lot of people, even if only a fraction vote. So give the website to our audience and where people can go for some of these resources and to help advocate for only Americans voting in American elections.
The website and the national coalition that we launched yesterday with over 70 organizations as part of it is the Only Citizens Vote Coalition. That's the coalition. And the website is www.onlycitizensvotecoalition.com. onlycitizensvotecoalition.com. You can go there, you get information. We're going to continue to add information. There's information there about the SAVE Act. And the talking points about it, what it does. Sign up, and we hope people will download the toolkit. The toolkit's coming, a digital toolkit, what you can do in your local area, because we have to get people involved, just like citizens going to school board meetings, parents going to school board meetings. We've got to get people involved, talking to their local election offices, their local county commissioners, city council, DMVs.
Well, Cleta Mitchell, we've got to leave it there. Thank you so much. And we've got to get involved and protect the integrity of our elections. We'll be right back with more with our Power Panel. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Well, let's get some reaction from today's Power Panel in Thursday's Roundup. Today's panel includes Robin Biro, a Democrat strategist. We have Tho Bishop, who is a content director for the Mises Institute, and Carly Atchison, who is a Republican strategist. So, panel, welcome. And let's start with this SAVE Act and the press conference from yesterday on the steps of Capitol Hill. Here is what Speaker Johnson had to say about the importance of securing America's elections for 2024 and beyond.
We are here this morning for a very important reason, as you all know, because there is currently an unprecedented and a clear and present danger to the integrity of our election system. And that is the threat of non-citizens and illegal aliens voting in our elections. In the last 5.5 months or so, I've been to over 101 cities doing events all around the country in more than half the states. The first or second question that I am asked in every public forum is about election security. Americans are deeply concerned about this, and it doesn't matter where you live and whether you're in a blue state or a red state, everyone's concerned. And due to the wide open border that the Biden administration has refused to close, in fact, that they engineered to open, we now have so many non-citizens in the country that if only 1 out of 100 of those voted, they would cast hundreds of thousands of votes. And since our elections are so razor thin in these days that we're in, and just a few precincts in a few states decide the makeup of Congress and who is elected to the White House, this is a dangerously high number, and it is a great concern to millions and millions of Americans.
All right. Well, setting aside kind of the questions and claims and Trump's claims in the 2020 election specifically, I mean, moving ahead, this is an important issue to ensure that only citizens are voting in America's elections. And so, Carly, can this be a bipartisan or at least nonpartisan issue when we're talking about American elections, or has Trump kind of paved the way that Republicans are always going to be called sort of these right-wing radicals if we're talking about election integrity as a whole?
Look, I think this is common sense legislation. It's already federal law that illegals cannot vote in federal elections, but states have their hands tied right now. Jenna, you're the lawyer. You probably know better than I the court case in Arizona that said actually the National Voter Registration Act preempts states. So this is a necessary piece of legislation. But Mike Johnson was talking about the second question he got being about election security. I'm sure the first question he gets is about border security. And so, while I'm happy to see that this is an effort Republicans are moving forward, where I'm disappointed with GOP leadership is the lack of action on actually closing the border. It's clear that the Biden administration is not interested in doing that. And time after time, we have seen Mike Johnson specifically cave to the left, cave to Democrats. I'm thinking most recently about the Ukraine aid leverage that we had. Just throw up their hands and say, we can't do anything. And so I think this piece of legislation is necessary, especially ahead of November. But I'm just so sick and tired of the talk from Republican leaderships about border security and no action being taken.
Yeah, and I think the vast majority of Republicans and anyone interested in America and securing our border shares those sentiments. But Robin, let's talk about Democrats, because in the last segment, Cleta Mitchell, who was on the steps with Speaker Mike Johnson, said that upwards of 85% of Americans, which include the vast majority of Democrats, are for only Americans voting in American elections. So why does this seem like such a partisan issue? And do you think that Democrats can get behind the SAVE Act?
Carly is correct. It's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. And look, former President Trump, spearheaded a formed a commission to investigate this and had to disband it because there were so few cases of this that it wouldn't sway an election, of course. But I want to say this. My Democratic friends know this. They see it as a waste of money and resources. But I want to say that anyone that's voting, Republican, Democrat, citizen, non-citizen, that shouldn't be voting is a serious issue, and we need to address it. We can't turn a blind eye to that as Democrats, because even if it's just 10 people across the country, it's still a serious issue, and they need to be held to account. They need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I've always said that. Make an example of them. So yes, I think that Democrats, this could be a bipartisan issue. And look, I don't like identity politics, but one thing that I would have advised Mike Johnson to have done would have been to at least got some black Republicans out there to look at the steps and see just a bunch of old white people. I really don't like that. That's not a good look. He needs to show that other people support this. It should have been on him to have reached across the aisle and gotten some of our Democratic colleagues, some of them are moderates. I mean, how hard would it have been to have at least got Joe Manchin out there? But, I say it's on him. Yes, it can happen, but he's got to do a better job of leading.
All right. Well, Tho, what's your response in terms of this legislation?
Well, it should be common sense, but I don't expect it to become legislation simply because, this is not about, what is on the law in the books. It comes down to, does this benefit the quest for political power? And the Democrats right now have all the leverage. We've seen the Republican House give up on many of the major battles in the last month. And so the reality is as long as states can get away with not enforcing the rules in the books, as long as you have Democrats in Congress that can prevent any sort of action item here, they're not going to do it. Because again, we have so centralized political power in this country. We have so created federal elections as the that's the largest dynamic that allows one side of the country to impose its will on the other side. That the political stakes are far too high, and you're not going to have some sort of tempering down of tension. You're not going to have any sort of return to norms. You're not going to have any turning point to we're just going to be governed by these laws and just do what is right. So long as you have vastly different worldviews in conflict here. I mean, politics is war by other means, and so Democrats are not going to give an inch on something that does nothing to benefit them, just for the talking points, like, just to take away a Republican talking point that is already kind of baked into the cake, into the way that people perceive questions of immigration and the like going forward. But just as important as this is fine, but the other dynamic too there is the question of illegal immigration and the census question, because that has massive ramifications when it comes to congressional representation and dynamics there. And so again, I would like to see this stuff passed. I mean, this should be status quo. This should be, what everyone can come to, but it's not going to happen so long as the stakes and the divides in this country are as hot as they are. And why would the Democrats cooperate on something that's going to take away a potential group?
Well, and that's what Speaker Johnson really needs to get a hold of. I agree with Robin that it is incumbent upon him to get Democrat colleagues on board with this. But we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. Well, the pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca is pulling its COVID-19 vaccine from the market after admitting that it can potentially cause deadly blood clots. But it's also suggesting that this is really just due to the market and the demand. Well, Epoch Times had a very interesting investigative report about 10 days ago. Listen to this.
A legal document has just been made public for the first time in which one of the largest pharmaceutical giants on the planet, AstraZeneca, admitted the fact that their COVID vaccine can cause a deadly blood clotting condition. The court document itself is actually from February, but it was just made public yesterday. And to make sense of it, let me give you a bit of background on it. Over in the UK, there is currently a class action lawsuit being lobbied against AstraZeneca, claiming that their COVID vaccine caused death as well as serious injuries in well over a dozen cases. these deaths and serious injuries all have to do with a very serious condition known as TTS. Plain English, this syndrome presents itself as a combination of blood clots as well as a severe drop in platelet levels. And what's really interesting to note is that TTS is actually a new syndrome that was only identified recently with the rollout of the COVID vaccines.
Joining me now to discuss is Abe Hamilton III, who's the host of the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio Network, where I host Jenna Ellis in the morning. He's also general counsel for the American Family Association and a policy analyst for AFR. You wear so many hats, Abe. So your thoughts from a legal perspective on this and how it may influence potentially Congress to recontemplate the liability shield, or will we get any accountability here in America?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jenna. Thank you for having me on. It should be noted for listeners here in America that AstraZeneca's admission came in litigation. They were a defendant in class action litigation where people in Europe actually died. And one man began the lawsuit, and then others piled on thereafter. And after AstraZeneca was forced to admit in filings that, yeah, there's a linkage between our injection and people's deaths, shortly thereafter, you have them unilaterally withdrawing their product from the market. This should show why we should be able to hold pharmaceutical companies accountable here in America instead of having this blanket immunity where they can literally throw the rock and not even hide their hand. Everybody knows they threw the rock, but our Congress has provided legislation, has provided statutory cover that allows them to experiment on the American people without any repercussions or any liability exposure for the consequences of their experimentation.
Yeah, which is just horrific. And it has never made sense to me why Congress would provide that type of liability shield. I mean, even when this wasn't, the COVID vaccines weren't FDA approved, and, we still had issues with some of these compulsory types of OSHA mandates that the Biden administration held. I mean, it should have always been that you have to be informed and it has to be voluntary, especially under the emergency use authorization of HHS. I mean, that's in the plain language of, all of those statutes. But can Congress go back and amend this blanket liability, or is this something that, we've learned the lesson here too late?
Congress can amend the statute. They provided the immunity. They can go back and amend it to allow the American citizens to secure justice. When you have the Epic Times' report indicating that a particular disease just arrived following all of this mass widespread, vaccination, that should be sobering for the American people to be aware of. And I think the only way Congress will respond is if the American citizen demands that Congress allows this type of amendment to take place. Otherwise, we're going to have the knowledge of all of these circumstances, the Biden administration and others, Biden himself saying this was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Well, the evidence shows that was not true. Yet Fauci and these pharmaceutical companies have not faced any accountability whatsoever. In fact, Fauci ended up getting a cush gig at Georgetown after leading us down this way. And if you have behavior that is rogue, that causes mass devastation, and there's no accountability, guess what you're doing? You're incentivizing a repeat of the same behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the political will to do this is very problematic timing wise, because you have President Trump, who was accountable for Operation Warp Speed, and then you have Joe Biden, of course, pushing the OSHA mandates. And it seems like neither the Republicans or the Democrats are very eager to address this problem because their respective presumptive candidates have some really bad track record on this. And so, what should the American people who are genuinely interested in seeing accountability push for? Because if we just have a class action lawsuit now, likely it's going to be kicked out based on the liability shield. We'll never get to discovery and the merits unless and until Congress actually acts.
Yeah, it would be an exercise of futility to file a lawsuit with the current status of the legal issue, because Congress has provided this blanket immunity for pharmaceutical companies. But what needs to happen is, like all things political, things tend to change when the American people get loud enough. And so we have to demand it, frankly. We have people unwilling in Congress to do what should be done. In light of this report from Europe, this should incentivize the American people and encourage the American people to begin to demand that Congress make it available to us to hold these companies accountable.
Yeah, and it seems like such a straightforward, nonpartisan proposition to say, of course we shouldn't be having these blanket liability shields for these major pharmaceuticals, even when it's and probably especially when it's some type of experimental drug that was foisted upon Americans, and largely a huge segment that felt compelled, they felt coerced, and some of them were compelled. Otherwise, they would suffer consequences like losing their jobs. And so, what can just about the last minute and a half we have with you, I hear Abe Hamilton. What can this report from AstraZeneca potentially influence in terms of Pfizer and Moderna, Johnson and Johnson for pulling their vaccines from the market as well, or at least making some of these admissions? Or will this not have any effect until we modify the liability?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to have any substantive effect until there's a modification of the liability issue. Because right now in America, they don't have to make any of these admissions. They don't have to face any liability for it. And so I can tell you, AstraZeneca didn't make that admission out of the goodness of their hearts. They made that admission because it was a feature of litigation. And until that is changed in our nation, we're not going to see anything similar happening on our shores. And you said earlier, I don't know why Congress allowed this blanket immunity. Well, it's simple. You know how it works. These pharmaceutical companies have a very robust lobbying presence in D.C. They have a way to access legislators in different ways, and they have been protected in exchange for their commitments. I'll just say it that way without getting a bit too salacious.
Graphic.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that robust lobbying presence is what's led to the immunity. And here's the other thing: massive profits for these companies.
Yeah, it's so absurdly corrupt. But Abe Hamilton, thanks so much for your analysis. We'll be right back with more with our Power Panel's reaction right after this. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce, 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Our Power Panel is back for reaction. We have Robin Biro, who's a Democrat strategist, Tho Bishop, who's content director for the Mises Institute, and Carly Atchison, who is a GOP strategist. So let's talk about AstraZeneca. And I think we all remember this now infamous clip from Justin Trudeau back in March of 2021 saying, yes, 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 get the vaccine. Listen to this.
For the Prime Minister, if you could just please talk to me about the AstraZeneca vaccine. We're hearing about people showing up to their appointments in Montreal. When they hear it's AstraZeneca, they don't want to get it. What's your message to people who are worried about getting this vaccine?
Health Canada and our experts and scientists have spent an awful lot of time making sure that every vaccine approved in Canada is both safe and effective. Therefore, the best vaccine for you to take is the very first one that is offered to you. That is how we get through this as quickly as possible and as safely as possible.
Well, now we're learning that that's really not the case. So, Tho, let's start with you. Should there be liability for the government in pushing these types of vaccines? I mean, obviously, this is just AstraZeneca. We're not talking about, Pfizer or Moderna yet in the United States. But could this impact some of our policy and liability factors here as well?
Well, there should be, but I'm not expecting it to happen. I mean, there's bipartisan fingerprints on the entire vaccine rollout, with a variety of these companies. I mean, you're already seeing the PR job done by AstraZeneca right now saying, oh, it's because of decreased consumer demand. It's not because of all these documented health effects. But what I find curious is that, you have people like Joseph Stiglitz being, rolled out there right now talking about how, oh, well, this unfortunate capitalist system we have the wolves taking care, preying upon the sheep. There's no bigger example of exploitation of the fundamental corruption of the modern economy, this entire racket that we saw did with the COVID vaccines, right? We had massive government subsidies to these companies. We gave massive protections to these companies, no viable means for victims of this entire campaign to seek restitution. I mean, we should be having massive investigations. We should be having trials. We should be having jail time. There should be jail time for the people that push these vaccines, these policies on the country. Because until you have accountability, real accountability, the people in power aren't going to learn any lessons from this. And so we've created a very unfortunate, broken system, and simply taking something off the market without real consequences to it is going to set the stage for something going forward. So again, this is one of the biggest corruptions that we have in the current economy that we have.
And Carly, speaking of accountability, I mean, we're heading into 2024 in the presidential election year, and Trump has not taken accountability for Operation Warp Speed. Biden hasn't taken accountability for the OSHA mandate. And I think this is a topic that both of the presumptive nominees for their parties don't want to talk about. But is this going to hurt Trump going into 2024, even among his base where he's wildly popular, but they really didn't like Operation Warp Speed?
I don't think so, because before this, I was working for Ron DeSantis's presidential campaign, and we were shouting from the rooftops that the Trump administration was the one who greenlighted all this stuff. Nobody believed it and nobody cared. So that's the unfortunate reality on the ground, especially among those base voters that you're talking about. They continue to see Democrats, the left, Joe Biden as responsible for the lockdowns and pushing the vaccine. Nobody remembers that it was actually Trump who was president pushing Operation Warp Speed, and that was the lockdown, the start of the lockdowns in his administration. So they're not interested. I don't think it's going to have any political repercussions for him in November. But an important point was made by the last panelist, which is we need a reckoning in Washington, D.C. for the disaster that was COVID. The FDA, the NIH, the CDC, there need to be congressional investigations. People need to be fired. The same people who were pushing all of this nonsense, talking about the so-called experts who were talking about shutting down schools, forcing the vaccine. I mean, the repercussions, we don't even know because you're not allowed to ask questions. And until we have that reckoning in DC, this is going to repeat itself. History is going to repeat itself. So I wish it were more on the forefront of American voters' minds. It's really not. And that's the unfortunate reality. But again, until we have that reckoning in DC, it's going to happen again.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The unfortunate reality is that neither of these candidates are going to bring that reckoning because they were both complicit in this in various ways. And this is why I also supported Governor DeSantis in the primary, because he was willing to bring that accountability. But Robin, so where does this place Biden's campaign and the Democrats? I mean, is there potentially a way that Trump could say, okay, sure, I pushed Operation Warp Speed, but I never, and rightly so, he never compelled the vaccine for anyone. That was Joe Biden. So is that a potential landmine for Democrats heading into the general?
Possibly, but my gut tells me no. And Carly's right. For Operation Warp Speed and all the facts that we know about it, Trump voters also aren't wanting to hear it. So it's sort of a wash, Jenna. I think that it would be a wash for Democrats, wash for Republicans. But look, you're the attorney here. What I anticipate are huge class action lawsuits. So that's going to be the next thing.
Well,
I just want to say,
but the issue, of course, is the liability shield. And so, should Congress go back and recontemplate that?
They should.
Go ahead, Robin.
They should absolutely do that. And look, I just want to say anecdotally, I myself suffered a mini stroke last year, and I'm like in perfect health. And I am questioning, did I get that blood clot in my brain from something like this? I don't know. I mean, we never know, but I think it's something worth investigating.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. And there
That's
are
okay.
so many other stories. I mean, even people like Chris Cuomo, who very famously emerged from his basement, after being quarantined from COVID and was pushing the vax, is now saying that he's suffering, long-term harm. And so, Tho, this goes back to, kind of traceability of can we prove vaccine injuries? And it seems like the government on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, really aren't interested in tackling this. In just about the last 30 seconds, I mean, what should Americans do to be concerned about this? How can we get Americans to care? I mean, I think this is a huge issue.
Well, hopefully we'll see some sort of state level stuff. I know
Yeah, go ahead,
I know
Phil.
DeSantis. I know DeSantis still has a grand jury out trying to investigate all this. But again, until you have people like Dr. Fauci and Gitmo, I mean, these are the sort of ramifications that should be here. I mean, there should be not just civil lawsuits, not just money going out there. I mean, there need to be people that pay time for the crimes that were committed here. Again, we have documentation of the fraudulent, lying to the public, knowingly lying to the public about this sort of stuff. Until you have that, there's going to be no change. And again, unfortunately, because of the bipartisan fingerprints, there's nothing in Washington that prepares us to have that sort of reckoning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. All right. Well, we'll be right back with more with our panel here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. And we're back with our Thursday Power Panel, Robin Biro, Tho Bishop, and Carly Atchison, to tackle one more topic, which is that Biden is withholding military aid to Israel that's coming after the package that he signed from Congress. And so this coming from Fox News, and the headline says, Biden vows to withhold weapons from Israel if Netanyahu goes forward with Rafah invasion. Quote, civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers, Biden told CNN's Aaron Burnett in an interview released Wednesday. I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, and they haven't gone into Rafah yet, if they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities that deal with that problem, Biden said. Well, Representative Elise Stefanik responded on her X account saying this: Joe Biden is withholding aid from Israel, giving Iran and its proxies the green light to escalate attacks against our ally. He has also held back munitions that would more directly target Hamas while limiting collateral damage. The Biden administration and Joe Biden himself have failed to support Israel. They're more concerned with their pro-Hamas wing of the Democrat Party. CNN seems to agree, saying this in a piece: the president has come under extraordinary pressure, including from members of his own party, to limit shipments of arms amid a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. So, Tho, your reaction?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, this is just a horrific episode right now. I mean, it's barbarism that brings on more barbarism, and it's just the unfortunate reality of the world we live in. I do think it's comical for Biden to suggest that he's any sort of moral high ground here. Of course, I mean, the same concerns about collateral damage would have been welcomed during the Obama years, would have been welcomed. I mean, I think his response to the terrorist attacks in Afghanistan during withdrawal was to blow up some civilians in a car. So I don't think Biden has any moral high ground there either. But I think in terms of the political ramifications in American politics, right? I mean, this is one of the interesting consequences of kind of the house of cards, this package of various groups where, the donor class of the Democratic Party is far on the outside of, the activist class of the Democratic Party, as we're seeing on college campuses and the like. And so, again, this is an area where I don't think Biden has a winning position here politically at home, because no matter what he does, he's going to alienate groups of his electorate that he needs. So, I think that is the political ramifications of all this. But again, it should not be taken away from, unfortunately, this the true horrors of this entire episode that we've seen since October 7th.
Yeah, and Robin, to Tho's point, I mean, it seems like Biden is in really a no-win situation with his base being fractured. We talk about, the infighting in the GOP all the time and how Speaker Johnson doesn't have a coalition of Republicans, but it seems like the Democrats are facing that same challenge when you look at, the differences between, Michigan Democrat voters versus maybe some more of the moderates of the party. So what would be your advice currently to the Democrat Party?
That's a really tough one. I'm not sure. This is a no-win situation for him. Generation Z is demonstrating all across college campuses. I'm running for state senate right now, and I'm being pressed hard on this issue by Gen Z. And it is a no-win issue. I want to say that as a veteran Army Ranger, I have concerns here about civilian deaths. This has moved from drone attacks and airstrikes to ground warfare, and that is incredibly dangerous. If I had advice to give him, I would say listen to your military leaders, listen to the generals, and make calculated decisions based off of, any good leader, any leader worth their salt, listens to their experts. Even former President Trump said that he was going to do that. So my only piece of advice for him is to listen to those who know better than himself.
Well, I mean, and that didn't really serve Trump when listening to Dr. Fauci, but maybe
No.
it's a little bit different of a situation here. But Carly, to Robin's point, though, I mean, good leadership makes the tough decisions and makes the right call, regardless of the political fallout. And Governor DeSantis has displayed that really well in Florida. And so, should Republicans press Joe Biden harder to make the right decisions, regardless of the fallout, even in his own party?
So first of all, I don't think Joe Biden is in any mental capacity to be making any kinds of decisions. We've known that, we've seen that. The people who are really running the White House are his progressive staffers. And so those are the experts, so quote unquote, who he surrounds himself with. And that's why you've seen him waver from. Before he was president, he had a pretty pro-Israel record. Now, to Tho's point, this is completely political. He is more worried about appeasing to a specific voting bloc. You mentioned in Michigan, Minnesota, I'm speaking specifically of Arab Muslim voters. He cannot lose those states. We know the Biden donors are the ones who are funding all the protests across the country on college campuses. So there's a direct link there. There's no leadership coming from this White House. And what's so frustrating is that the enemy in this war is Hamas. It is not Israel. Somehow the onus has been on Israel ever since October 7th, when innocent civilians were slaughtered. Now the left wants to talk about civilian deaths. Look, this is war. It's ugly, but Israel jumps through hoops to make sure that they're doing their very best to protect civilians while Hamas hides behind civilians. Let's not forget who the enemy is here. This is a simple decision from the President of the United States. Israel needs to win the war against Hamas. We should be doing everything possible to make sure that Israel wins that war, period.
Yeah, well said. And Tho, in just about the last minute or so that we have here, what about the activists? And we've seen these professional agitators that are coming into college campuses. It seems like over the last week, some of this has died down just a little bit, and we've seen some of the universities that are enforcing their rules. But then we haven't really seen much from Congress by way of actually taking action to defund places like Columbia, UCLA. So where does this go from here, heading into 2024?
Well, unfortunately, we saw the House pass a bill that outsourced basically civil rights code to a globalist organization, allowing them to set the framework for what can be actionable in the Civil Rights Act. I mean, to me, that's a massive violation of American sovereignty when you're outsourcing it to groups. When you look at these actors involved, like Council of Europe has George Soros as one of his major source factors there. I think that's a problem in its own right. I think the larger issue of higher ed generally, I mean, I think that there's good valid conversation to be had about broad taxing of the endorsements or of the endowments, things like that, not simply because of these issues, but just the entire rigged game of higher education, the student loan debts. And so I think there needs to be a big reevaluation on how we treat higher ed in this country and its current standings. But I'm concerned about what is being done on this issue with bipartisan support more than I'm concerned about the lack of action right now. I think states have a priority in terms of making sure that those campuses are handled, but I don't want the feds involved.
Yeah, really well said. Well, panel, really appreciate your time. And that's all the time that we have for Jenna Ellis tonight. Make it a great night. See you tomorrow.